The Federal Reserve is set to kick off its first meeting of the year today. While the central bank isn't expected to make any major policy changes during its two-day meeting, questions about its long-term policy decisions remain. With us now to discuss this is Brandon Pizzurro, GuideStone Capital Management Portfolio Manager. Brandon, thank you for being here. They really don't want to even say coronavirus because that kind of thing could send the wrong message to the market. So what is it long-term you expect to see from the statement tomorrow?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. So I think one of the things we've kind of put to bed from last year is that the Fed will remain on hold. They've been very careful and good at communicating with the market. I think the market has really gotten into a good cadence with how they're interpreting Fed speak and Fed data, whether it be from the chairman or from Fed governors. So by and large, I think the market's looking for nothing big or nothing shocking coming out of this. There's certainly plenty of other things that markets can concern themselves with, not the least of which, of course, is coronavirus, as you started with.
How are you? We've been asking a lot of people this today. How are you weighing and monitoring the coronavirus situation?
You know, you kind of want to look at two things. I mean, we have to think about corollaries from other viruses or epidemics that have happened over the last 10 or 15 years. So that's one way. That's kind of reading the tea leaves, as a lot of people do when these kind of things happen, but also being cautious about it. There's a couple of things that I guess glass half full. Compared to SARS from about 17 years ago, you think about how, technology's improved, healthcare's improved overall, the speed of communication has improved, public health has improved in China, et cetera. But also because of some of that technological advancement, we have just the fact that everyone can travel quicker. If you think about the high-speed rail originating from that province, it actually connects every major city to Wuhan. So, I mean, you think about the spread of that potentially could be concerning. So definitely cautious about it. Still waiting on more official kind of WHO, CDC remarks. I saw just before I came on that the White House is considering some type of travel bans as well. So, these things in general typically tend to take about 4 weeks before the S&P recovers some of its route relative to, say, a 10-year Treasury. So if history is any guide, several weeks of this could persist with high vol. Obviously, today's a big snapback. How
do you feel about how they're going to be starting to lay the groundwork for what they're going to do with the balance sheet come April? So are they going to be how are they going to communicate it to the markets so the markets don't get freaked out by this idea that maybe there's going to be a potential pullback in that liquidity?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think a lot of the people are parsing data or parsing words, I guess, more than anything in terms of whether or not this is quantitative easing. I think there's rationale for it not being specifically quantitative easing, but even your layman could overlay an S&P 500 chart with Fed sheet balance sheet expansion and see that that's certainly been a nice tailwind for markets. Not jolting markets further and making sure that liquidity is still going to be in place is something that people will be looking for. If you got a hint of that getting pulled back sooner than expected, that can certainly create more gyration. So always a tightrope for the Fed when they're communicating.
Brandon, I know you've told us that there are three sectors you like going into the year: financials, healthcare, and industrials. I want to pick up on industrials first because we heard from United Technologies today. We heard from 3M today. And with both of them, there are some various headwinds. In the case of UTX, it's a matter of the exposure to the 737 MAX. When you look at both the sort of specifics on some of these companies, but also the broader macro picture of what coronavirus could mean and just general demand from China, what is attracting you to that area?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So just a couple things, I guess, within the sector. When I've come on before, we've talked about there's kind of two levels. Of course, there's sector, and then there's various industries within the sector. To your point, there are some names that have stumbled. The sector overall has been pretty beaten up when you think about kind of the tail end of our phase one trade deal that we got with China. Industrials as a sector is one of the cheapest within the S&P. So from a sector perspective, it's less expensive. I think some of the slight bright spots that you could see within industrials is not painting with such a broad brush. Obviously, Boeing is a big percent of even U.S. GDP, a huge component to that sector. And to the extent that any suppliers or, of course, Boeing itself had weighed down the sector, that's something to think about. But opportunistically within there, once the market can hopefully get past what may or may not become of the coronavirus issue here, China's growth was starting to come back and looked like it wasn't slowing, making a slight rebound. So if you're looking at a little bit further out into the year, halfway point, maybe towards the end of the year, there could be some prospects there that are getting beaten up even further now because of virus concerns that might be interesting later in the year.
Brandon Pizzurro is GuideStone Capital Management Portfolio Manager. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And we want to bring you an update on the coronavirus. United States Secretary of Health and Human Services Alex Azar is giving an update from Washington right now. He says there are no new confirmed cases of the virus. He also said Americans should not be concerned for their personal safety at this time. Azar says the president is closely monitoring the situation and is being continuously updated, and we will bring you any further updates as they do come.
Hey investors, Zach Guzman here. Are you interested in learning more about the markets and getting the latest financial news? Well, then click right here to subscribe to our Yahoo Finance YouTube channel. Get the latest up-to-the-minute market analysis, big interviews in the world of finance, and information on how to manage your money every day wherever you are.